Hi everyone, good morning and thanks for joining our Spring Summer 21 presentation. So we have lots of new ideas and inspiration that we're going to talk about this morning. So this season we're introducing our INSIGHT book, which is a first for UPW. So we decided to make you part of the design process. So what happens behind closed doors and UPW. So every season we do a lot of in-depth research into what's happening around the world. So from an economic perspective to an environmental, creative perspective, in order to create products that are relevant to our market and to the global society that we are living in. So let's get started with the presentation. So the very original idea behind the collection is this film called Baraka that came out in the early 90s. So in this film, the director spoke about the discrepancies of our modern society. So on one hand, we have the tribes of of Africa, of the Amazon forest, of Australia. They live very simple lives, respecting their tradition, respecting and cherishing the environment that they're living in. And on the other hand, we've got a very hectic, sort of fast-paced, technology-driven lifestyle in the West. So nothing has changed much from the 90s. The only thing that has started to change is our attitudes to to the environment. So in our society, in our Western society, we see more people that are craving almost like a more primal way of living, where we work less, where we connect with our local communities, we respect our environment, we're spending more time and more money on things like meditation or health yoga retreats. So, we find this really interesting, but at the same time, part of our existence is actually relates more to technology, and we're witnessing a very rapid technological development today. So for the first time in our history, we can access the digital and the virtual world in a more realistic way through, virtual reality and things like augmented realities, and artificial intelligence are allowing us to have a more realistic and a new kind of interaction with inanimate objects. So we really wanted to translate these two contrasting concepts in our collection, and we have developed 6 stories, which I'm going to go through quickly this morning. So the first story is called Earthling. So this story really is about the idea of going back to our roots, of rediscovering our identities as human beings, rediscovering our communities. So the artifacts and the products in this story have a very rustic, kind of handmade aspect. Of course, things like provenance are very important because, of course, provenance tells us who made the products, where they were made, and how they were also made. So let's have a look at color for this group. So the Earthling colors are represented by a family of warm summer browns with a touch of gold. So this is to celebrate the color of the earth, its fertility, and also the bounty that earth brings us. So there are nurturing shades of honey, pollen, citrus fruits, and nuts. And some more ideas for tonal shades of browns with a touch of gold. And moving on to stitch. So the textiles, the fabric in this theme have got very aged, distressed appearance that kind of bring a sign of the history of each material. Also, again, the fabric, the textiles feel quite rustic, but at the same time, they're very sophisticated and very summery. Again, there's some very simple tonal stripes in fresh linens and some more inspiration about construction ideas and crafts. The materials feel eroded and show their lives and their ages. Again, imperfections become an added value. There's combinations of raw materials like fiber and clay. And there are textured stripes, combinations of material, like soft materials like cotton with some more rustic ones like straw. And there's also open work stitches, knitted in rustic yarns, but with a very sophisticated aspect. And we quite like this idea of the modern hippie that we saw on the catwalk. And some pages from our INISGHT book. So we've included some fine gauge stitches with a raw aspect, irregular jacquards. Again, imperfections become beautiful details. And some other swatches in chunky gauges that feel quite rustic, again, very handcrafted. There's a hand knit feel, but again, that feels very modern and sophisticated. The next theme is called Eternal, and it follows on from something that we spoke about last season. So it's this new notion of health. So people are becoming more health conscious. The idea of health, though, stems from simply being disease-free. It's a more holistic vision of health, where we're thinking about our physical health, but also our mental and spiritual health. Millennials and Gen Zs don't consider themselves to be religious, but they think about psychological and mental health, and they're associated with spirituality. However, this notion of spirituality is a very different one, and it marries the idea of science and technology. So we quite like this contrast of mental, spiritual health, spirituality with science and technology. And that's what we looked at in this group. Some inspiration, the work of Francis Gray and Alistair Thompson and Paul Captain. So these three artists use very traditional material, traditional ways of working with this material, but in a very contemporary manner. Color. So when we thought about developing a color palette for Eternal, we thought about something that is eternal in our universe, and that's creativity. So we looked at art from different ages, from antiquity to modern art and contemporary art. So there are time-faded shades of green, terracotta, washed blues, also traditional shades of core colors like sandy tones, khakis, and greens are reinterpreted for spring, summer. There are also some bold contrasts creating with tonal colors. And stitch. So this theme feels very sculptural, very poetic and mysterious. The fabrics in this group drape in a very simple and a very relaxed manner that's carefully engineered. Also, the fabrics are quite structured. They're quite compact as well. Some of the textiles have got this soft and spongy appearance. Some other ones are clean and dry, structured. Classic art and beauty are reinterpreted with a contemporary twist. And we also have some digitally rendered lace structures and very high-tech meshes, like you can see in the next three looks here. And some more inspiration for stitches with engineered pleats, ribs, and pin tucks. And some pages from our INISGHT book. So there are traditional stitches like cables and lace that have a more sort of technical appearance. And also the notion of spirituality is interpreted with gauzy yarns with a fuzzy aspect. The next story, Aquatic, takes inspiration from water. So water has been in the news for quite a long time in the past 6 months, in the past year actually. Not for very good reasons, unfortunately. We are witnessing the damage that we're doing to the environment through the observation of water. If you think of the melting ice caps, the dying coral reefs, floods. So water is the most common substance that we have on this planet, but one that we always take for granted. So in this theme, we really wanted to celebrate the beauty of water, but also bring our attention to its destructive power as a reminder to the damage that we're doing to the environment. Some inspiration, this is the work of Australian artist Ben Young, Jack Usfort on the right. We also loved these deep tonal shades of blue in this melting iceberg on the left-hand side. And this is Haruka Kojinmei, a Japanese artist, that recreated a slice of the ocean in an art gallery. And let's look at color. So the color palette for this group ranges from aquatic blues in rich tonal shades, some of which have hints of green, to some more warm marine shades in greenish browns inspired by the seaweed and marine vegetation. And moving on to some more yellowish greens with a touch of warm earthy shades. And let's have a look at stitch. So the stitches, the fabrics in this group are quite minimal, boxy shapes with subtle geometric fine gauge jacquards inspired by the tiling of swimming pools. And a similar idea with clashing bright summer stripes. And again, a very similar idea that's quite graphic, quite bold. We've also included some experimental tie-dye effects that mimic water reflections, and more tie-dye effects with a digital aspect that you can see in the next few garments here. And sprayed effects that could be reinterpreted as fine gauge jacquards in knit. Also, traditional summer patterns like a Breton stripe become updated with a cleaner and almost a futuristic look. And sheer marine gradients that could be interpreted with contrasting yarn, some sheer, some more dense, irregular chevrons as well. And finally, some stitches from our INISGHT book. So you see these contrasting stripes with wavy patterns, irregular chevrons, and very elegant fine gauge jacquard on the left, and some other stitches that mimic water reflections on the right. And moving on to the next theme, Starseed. So this theme is inspired by space travel. All of a sudden, space travel has become very relevant again. In 2019, we saw the 50th anniversary of men landing on the moon. Elon Musk has announced his plans to travel to Mars in the near future. There's companies like Virgin Galactic and Orion Span that are already putting together holiday packages for people, holiday makers, to travel into orbital space, so around the Earth. So this is very interesting from a design perspective, because of course it's going to be down to us as designers to design fibers, fabrics, garments, and utensils that these people are going to carry into microgravity environments. And this is something quite imminent that's going to happen in our lifetime. So that's why we've included this story at this time. Some inspiration, this is a screenshot from a VR experience created by American artist Laurie Anderson, where users can virtually travel to the moon using a VR headset. This is a screenshot from a PC software called Space Engine. It's a very advanced version of Google Earth. So it's a simulation of the whole universe based on real scientific data. So users can travel anywhere they like in the universe. Let's have a look at color. So for this group, we've looked at some very gentle, pale shades, trying to imagine what it would be like to see color under the moonlight or from the space station or on another planet. So here you can see a combination of classic pastels, which are highlighted by metallic tones, while on the right, we have some apricot tints that work together with some very delicate shades of aqua. And stitch. So there are some pearlescent metallic effects. Similar idea in some of Craig Green's looks. And prismatic metallic effects. The fabrics in this group feel very metallic, silky, and fluid. light and gauzy meshes with an irregular surface and a metallic sheen, and soft and painterly tie-dye effects. Also, the stitches are very organic, very textured, mimicking planetary surfaces, as you can see in this slide here. Finally, some pages from our inside book. So you'll see the swatches have got a very organic aspect, but a very technical handle. And some jacquards and more textured stitches on the right-hand side. So the next theme is 5G. So this theme, of course, takes the name from the new phone network. And this theme really celebrates this very rapid technological development that I was talking about at the beginning of my presentation. So for the first time in our history, we can access the digital world in an increasingly realistic manner through the use of virtual reality or also augmented reality. So 5G is it's more like a color story, how we see color and texture in a virtually simulated environment. So this theme feels is very loud, very bright, very colorful, but it's not chaotic, however. The graphic elements that make it create a very peaceful and contemplative space. It's almost like a regenerative artificial paradise. And this image by Bjork really captures the mood of 5G. This next image is by design duo Luftwerk. So they transform everyday spaces into multisensory experiences. And let's have a look at color. So 5G is very light, very bright and luminous. The colors also are as bright as you would see them on screen. They're very playful, spontaneous combinations of color. Modern pastels with very ethereal and surreal qualities. And stitch. So there's very flat and polished surfaces in this group with a multitude of bold color blocks. And again, some very sharp monochromatic looks with some subtle textures. Color blocks, geometric intarsias in contrasting yarns. Color collages, flat jacquards in orderly stripes. And very flat, very polished, very neat surfaces, very precise. Saturated colors, gauzy layers of fabrics in synthetic yarns. And pixelated jacquards that become contemporary camouflages or digital animal prints. And macro stripes in tonal shades, partial knitting and intarsia that are used to create a sort of modern interpretation on traditional patterns like quilt squares and argyle. And here's some swatches from our inside book. So we've got these very bold stripes, micro jacquards, traditional patterns interpreted in neon colors. And finally, moving on to the very last theme, post-consumerist. So I'm sure we can all agree that the days of mindless consumption are finally coming to an end. However, as a race, unfortunately, we have created enormous amounts of waste, of rubbish. And there's many creative people, many artists that are repurposing all this excess rubbish that unfortunately we have created. However, there are also other people that are thinking of new creative ways to, to move forward without creating any more physical objects. So here in the UK, I'd like to mention a couple of apps that are becoming very popular. One is called Swapsy, that allows people to connect in their local community and swap unwanted items of clothing. Olio is a similar app that allows people to swap unwanted food. So I think this is quite interesting because it's a very high-tech form of barter that also relates to the very first story, to Earthling, that kind of shows how people really crave a more, almost like a more primitive existence within their local communities, but still where technology is very important. So I'm going to show you some inspiration. It's the work of Gravy Lubinsky on the left, Dinka Decker on the right. So there's a very spontaneous and frugal approach to design. Everything is made mindfully and with purpose. So this is Zero Waste Daniel, a fully transparent zero waste label that uses leftover fabrics that were destined to landfill. Color. So the color palette of Post-consumerist embodies the very honest and the very dynamic spirit of this group. So we have some luxuriant shades of orchid purple and peacock on the right-hand side, in contrast to these other recycled brights on the left-hand side. There are also some very rich and saturated shades and some iridescent tints. Stitch. So the fabrics in this group have got a very kind of multi-textural appearance with recycled items, and they feel very raw and experimental and improvised. The simple volumes and shapes, so the fabrics drape on the body, creating organic silhouettes. Rustic patchworks with handcrafted finishes. Some more inspiration for color and texture using recycled material. Traditional and heritage patterns are reinterpreted using waste and recycled materials. And materials clash together on the body, creating a raw and a very dynamic aesthetic. And also this theme feels very expressive, multi-material, very resourceful and naive. And I'm going to conclude with a couple of pages from our INISGHT book. So there's in the swatches here, you can see a very lively clash of colors, patterns, and fabrics with a very raw aspect. And some more ideas for fabrics with a rough, almost like a raggedy aspect. They feel quite improvised, but at the same time, very fashion forward. So this concludes my part of the presentation. Please stay on. I'm gonna hand you over to Kwan. I hope you enjoy the presentation and see you very shortly.